Okay, so we are on week 4 of the Range of Strength teacher training. And this week we're going to be looking at optimizing end range strength. And for the sake of this course and this teacher training, it's one thing for us to understand the end range agonist activation protocols. So that will be found in lesson 3 in the Range of Strength certification course content. But it is another thing for us to understand how to better optimize these positions to better suit any given client. So this lesson and assignment this week is going to give us an opportunity to experience how to troubleshoot and optimize end range strength training and why it is that we want to do that. This is truly something that we need to experience and learn to troubleshoot for ourselves before understanding how to do that with someone else. So you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're showing someone, for example, a basic end range agonist activation exercise and it's too easy for them. And then you're thinking, okay, well, what do I do next? With this week's lesson, you should, with what we're presenting, be able to better troubleshoot scenarios like that to choose a better exercise intensity and option for that individual, and vice versa. If it's too hard for them, how are you going to regress it and ensure that they get the same benefit out of that end range strength as the next person? So by learning how to optimize the end range positions, we can facilitate a greater opportunity to maximize neural drive within the stretch position and increase motor unit recruitment. This is super important for us and will lead to a greater result when we look to move to other exercises where we want to produce motor patterns. So this would be, if we're looking for range specific, flexibility specific motor patterns, it would be like things like loaded range exercises, like a Jefferson curl or a cross bench pullover, for example. So by learning how to do that in these end range positions and recruit more motor units, we will be able to deliver better motor patterns as we move on to the next stage. So let's talk about defining the end range. And loaded range exercises, like mentioned earlier, like the Jefferson curl and cross bench pullover, for example, they're one way that we can access end range and look to increase end range strength. But this is not an ideal entry point for clients, especially if they cannot readily access these ranges without load, or make right distinctions of execution and the feeling within the movement. The end range strength exercises and protocols that we're getting into for this week will allow us to facilitate those opportunities better for our clients so that they can actually understand what muscles we need to be using and recruiting and understand these positions a lot better. So by therefore thinking about using the end range agonist activations as an entry point, we are better able to introduce and troubleshoot end range strength for our users and clients. This is also a great way to think about rehabbing strength. If you come across a situation where you're dealing with someone who is injured or just coming off of an injury, or maybe they've been graduated from physio, and oftentimes they're graduated from physio before they're actually ready to be, and oftentimes they do end up in a trainer's hands. This could be an opportunity for you to better strengthen them and rehab their strength and get them back to a better capability. Also, for individuals that may have long-term restrictions in these movements or certain movement patterns that require end range strength, but they're not able to get into them, or there's certain issues, osteoporosis, bone deformities, what have you, using end range agonist activation exercises will allow you to bring the muscles alive that have been laying dormant safely for these individuals. So the key with defining end range strength in this lesson, the key is for us is that we want to become masters of body positioning. So understanding the movement patterns that we're trying to strengthen, the muscles associated, and what kind of positions are best going to suit end range strength for that user. The better the position, the better the neural drive, the better the motor unit recruitment. It's how you want to be thinking. In this week's assignment, we will be presenting a few different scenarios to allow you to troubleshoot best positioning for your own body and ability. And then you can also share discussion with each other so that we can talk about maybe other scenarios that may come up. Some of you might run into some roadblocks yourselves where maybe you can't access the greatest range or the greatest position in some of these exercises. So it'll be a good opportunity for us to share discussions around that. And then lastly, we want to be thinking about the methods of execution within this. So choosing the method of execution will be just as important as finding the right body position to get the results that we are looking for. We will focus on 3 methods, which will be the static hold, the pulses, and the overcoming isos. In that order, it's basically easiest to hardest, more advanced, and we will discuss the scenarios and how that can come about. So at the start, it is also important putting your coaching hat on and thinking less robotic and more accommodating, in that technical execution is at the forefront, not numbers and figures, sets and reps. So for example, even though we know that a 5 to 10 second static hold or a time frame is most ideal for the strength gains that we want, if a client can't do that even at the most regressed position, it would be more accommodating for us to start them out at maybe a 2 second, 3 second hold for multiple reps, and make sure that we are keeping our clients' well-being at the forefront of our coaching practice. So I really want you to think less about, what are the best numbers, and more about optimizing the exercise to accommodate the type of client you're working with. You can simply take someone who can only hold an ideal position for a couple of seconds up to a 10-second hold over time, and those can become targets for individuals with those types of restrictions, which makes it a little more exciting. So that is another component I want you to be thinking about when it does come to these prescriptions and numbers and ways of thinking about doing these protocols. I want you to, approach it with that in mind as well. Once we have established the right technique and execution with static holds, we can think about advancing end range strength. So it's not necessarily just a matter of, this is, you've demonstrated a good static hold here, we're going to move on. We want to explore the body's ability to produce strength and movement in that range. So the pulses now introduce more of a dynamic movement pattern in the end range. So it's enhancing that strength and agonist activation at a higher rate of speed. So start slow and increase the speed is kind of like the idea there. So we can look at moving into something like a pulse to now think about like the rate of speed that we are moving in that position. And then we can move into something like an overcoming isometric to really hone in on maximal recruitment. That's really like the goal here, is we want to use ways, methods, and strategies where we can recruit more. That's the goal, especially if we are looking to advance our flexibility and get into some more advanced positions like splits, back bridge. Something more advanced of an overcoming ISO would be giving us a greater opportunity in those more expanded positions. So what we're going to look at with this method of execution this week are 2 different approaches. One is going to be the ascending approach. So we're going to do a set from easiest to hardest. So we're going to do a static hold, a pulse, and an overcoming isometric all within one set. And then we're going to do a descending approach. So we're going to start with the hardest position, the overcoming iso, and then we're going to descend down for pulses and static holds, and we'll share the experiences of both. This protocol wouldn't be an entry point for a client that hasn't done this before. You would introduce them to statics, and then introduce them to pulses, and then introduce them to the overcoming isos. But the ascending descending protocol is definitely one for you to experience, because this would be kind of like the top of the line of where we would want to get a client to get them to a stage where they can do ascending descending sets with all three protocols. And ideally we're getting the best result that way. So for this week's assignment, review the examples that I've prescribed. So giving you a couple different exercises that I'm showing you the different ways that body position changes to find the greatest end range of motion. So I want you to play with those and find your greatest end range of motion based on what I've presented. And then you're going to troubleshoot best execution. So find that position that works best for you, but then apply the ascending and descending method on each. If you're unable to get in a position where you can do the overcoming iso correctly, then we can, think of other ways that we can apply the static and the pulse together, at least, because the overcoming iso does require you to get into the greatest end range of motion in a particular position to feel that. But I don't think any of you will have much trouble with that. So under the post, share your experience with some words. So you can share specifically, what you found or what you experienced in the exercises, but also share a clip from one of the exercises showcasing how you did, and just kind of, putting yourself in the trenches with us and saying, I did these, and this is a clip from the one that I liked the most or that I hated the most. And we'll go from there. So that is this week's lesson and assignment. You're also encouraged to head over to the Range of Strength certification course and have a go through the end range agonist activation lesson for some more further details.